This crowd rises to its feet. Toro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland right of the lane, lob to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including FanDuel Sports Network without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. It is August, so that means we are 1 month closer to Cavs basketball returning. We've got some international competition at the end of the month, training camp next month. It's just around the corner, and what better time to have a mailbag? And my first question of the day is, Carter Rodriguez, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I like the shirt. Is this a normal podcasting shirt for you? Were you coming from work?
I'm coming from work. This is a work shirt.
You look cute, brother, man.
Because I'm podcasting, I undid a button compared to shirt.
Yeah.
I'm not letting it all out when I'm at the office. But yeah, it's busy day running on the go. So I didn't change into one of my typical podcasting shirts.
I'll tell you what, as I'm getting older, I'm getting increasingly reckless about the amount of buttons I've got loose in the wild, I feel like for most people it's an inverse thing where they want to get more buttoned up as they get older. I'm getting reckless, brother.
I think that's just you tapping into your heritage right there a little bit.
I think it is. I do think it is.
Little bit of that Cuban heritage coming out. Soon it's going to be all the way down to your chest. And you know what? I love that for you, buddy. Let it all hang out. What do you got to hide it for?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I have pride. Okay. No, I don't. I actually don't. But, nevertheless, you should, listener.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? Speaking of our listeners, you guys should be prideful because every time we call out for mailbag questions, you guys deliver, you guys bring it, and we really, really do appreciate that. So enough small talk. Let's kick things off. Project NBA asks, Carter, what two lineup combinations that you both see Kenny actually running with this season do you think will have the highest net ratings next season? I'm going to kick this off because I feel pretty strongly about my answer here. My two lineups. The first is the core four and whatever small four doesn't start. So if they start Max, it's going to be the one with Hunter. If they start Hunter, it's going to be the one with Max. And the reason for that is whoever's starting is going to play more high leverage minutes. We saw this last season where the core four with Max was phenomenal. It had a great net rating. The Hunter one was just a little bit better. I think whoever is starting, the inverse lineup is going to be the one that comes in, attacks some second units, and just gets a little bit easier of a time. Do you have a candidate that you think is going to be among the Cavs' two best net rating lineups next year?
Can I eat a little crow real quick first? I read this as, what two-man lineup combinations do you think he'll run to have the best net rating? I'm like, Darius and Jared and Donnie and Evan. I don't know, man. Seems pretty easy. so whoops. I guess
cutting corners.
I guess we'll open up with a whoops. All right. I do think I think Lonzo is going to be a plus minus superstar. And I my first instinct was going to be pretty much, I think you have a very good answer first off. So kudos to you, brother. But I still actually think those guys are still going to be playing in too many high leverage minutes. Like, your net rating leaders don't tend to be your starters or even your second best lineup. It's like your third or your fourth most played lineup that is really playing against, where the world is lined up in a way where you're just consistently running second units off the floor.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be like some weirdo lineup, like Alonzo, Darius, Larry, Evan, like for summer, something weird like that. That's just gonna blow teams out of the water. Like, I mean, do you offhand know what our best lineup was last year?
It depends, kind of like where you're going with from a minute standpoint.
By
like
net rating. And when I say by minutes, to be very clear, I mean like that plays real minutes. If you play at least like 60, 70 minutes, like I just pulled it up. The Cavs' best 5-man lineup last year was Levert, Niang, Mitchell, Merrill, Mobley. They had a plus 34.2 net in their 84 minutes.
84 minutes. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to think of ones. I'm sure it's going to be something funky like that.
How many lineups for the Cavs played 100 minutes last year?
7.
3.
Oh my God, that's wild.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of ones that are going to be used frequently. So that's why I'm thinking, core 4.
And for a frame of reference, Justin, sorry to keep interrupting you. That was our 4th most played 5-man unit last year.
That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable. I think the other one that comes to mind. So core 4 with whoever the other small forward is would be one of my answers. My other answer is I think it's going to be Donnie with whichever big Kenny ends up pairing him with this season. I can see him going back to Mobley. I think there's a case for that with the playmaking. I could see it going back to Jarrett. Whoever Donnie and that big is, along with Lonzo, Max, and Hunter. And the reason for that is we crush teams when we are staggering. That it's one of the things that makes the Cavs so difficult to play against in the regular season is you're always having at least 2 all-star level talents on the court at all times with role players that make a lot of sense. I don't think the version of the staggered lineups that's going to be as good this year is going to be the Darius one, just because when he does come back from that toe surgery, I don't think you're going to see 100% Darius right away. I think, they're going to ease him back into it. I don't expect that lineup to be as productive. Whereas Donovan's going to have a lot of opportunities to play with these guys. He's going to have, a lot of chemistry with this group. We saw a lot of lineup stability with him in those staggered units. So I think that lineup's just going to crush, where it's Donnie with Lonzo, Max, Hunter, Mobley.
That's a nasty lineup, man.
That's a fun lineup, and I think it would be really hard for teams to deal with them on both ends of the court, honestly.
Yeah, is that your 5 that close? With Darius out to start the year?
Not necessarily. I think I might end up closing with Donnie, Lonzo, Hunter, Mobley, Allen. I don't think I would automatically default to, Hunter at the 4. I love the size that you can have with Hunter at the 3. I'm also assuming that the Cavs are going to be playing and closing games with the lead more frequently than not. I don't think they're going to be chasing. I think that's my closing with the lead lineup. And then if I need to get buckets in a hurry, I'm downshifting a little bit to Hunter at power forward and Max at small forward.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Anyway, sorry, they got us off mailbag, but it jumped out at me.
Hey, no problem. That's the thing about mailbags. It's always, free flowing thoughts. There's always other things that we come from it. Next question. Josh says, I saw a tweet that the Cavs have very little movement / impact to their offense. He is referencing a chart from Basketball Index that cites both the movement impact and movement attack rate for NBA teams. The Cavs are right at the league average line in terms of movement impact, but are the second lowest in movement attack rate. His question is, does that need to change with how good the offense was last year? And looking at this chart, I'm not as familiar with the specifics. When you have something half court specific and attack rate and things like that, obviously the Cavs are a league average in terms of the efficiency within this metric. But I look at some of the teams around them. Third is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Then right behind them is the Indiana Pacers. And I feel like I don't have to go a whole lot longer. That's the 2 teams that were in the NBA Finals. The Thunder had a terrific offense this year. The Pacers had a dominant offense once they got going. There's a lot of movement within their offense, but I think what this shows is the difference between wasted movement and efficient movement, right? I think the Cavs obviously still have room to grow off of those types of sets. But you look at this and there's not really a whole strong correlation in terms of offensive efficiency. So while I'd like to see more creation from a variety of different ways, I don't think there necessarily has to be movement for the sake of movement. I liked how the offense and the cuts felt last season.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like they had a real high calorie, high caloric and nutritional value movement where I didn't watch them and feel like they were a static offense or and everyone spots up and waits. They don't run a lot of crazy, Steph style pin down actions where, Darius runs through 6 screens around and shoots. Like, that's not really what they do. They still are an offense that, generates their advantages in other ways. That's probably why they don't rate crazy high on that metric. But like, I don't think, it's just like a lot of these metrics. Like, high doesn't always mean, like, the big one that jumped out is passes per game. High doesn't always mean good. Low doesn't always mean bad. It just, it's what are you getting out of the passes you make, and in this case, what are you getting out of the motion you do have? And I think for the most part of the regular season, especially, like, they got a lot of juice out of that particular squeeze.
Yeah, I totally agree there. Next question, live from the YouTube chat, is Drew M, who asks, do you guys think Tristan's push for number 13 in the rafters is over?
I'm going to presume he means, like, because is he going to play one more year? Because, whether you want to have Tristan's number retired, your mileage may vary on that, but nothing this offseason should determine that. I got to say, the way I feel, and, like, this is not informed in any way, every day I see the Cavs don't sign someone else, my percentage of a Tristan Thompson return feels like it goes up a little notch, a little,
okay,
just a little. It's like a dial, and we're just cranking it up one tick every day as we get closer to camp. You got to expect they're going to fill this thing by camp, right?
Yeah, I would assume so.
Well, at least one of them.
Yeah.
So, obviously Tristan's still working out really, really hard. Clearly isn't ready for his NBA journey to be over. And, like, there's worse things to do than have that continuity, have that leadership in the locker room, and that connection to your title team. So I'm going to say maybe it's over. What do you think, Justin?
I'm going to, let's just cover our bases here. Let's tag team this. You're taking it as, is his NBA journey over, or at least his chapters with the Cavs? I'm going to take it the other way, where is he going to continue making a case for it? I think the case for it already existed after he left Cleveland the first time. I think his contributions to the championship team were warrant his number being up in the rafters. I think everything that you hear behind the scenes in terms of what he was as a leader and is as a leader for this team, that weighs heavily to me. And every franchise has different standards for retired jerseys, but to me, I always interpret it as, is the connection there with the fans? Is this going to be something that's meaningful? And I think back to the 2016 finals. I think he was the third most impactful player in that series, with Kevin Love suffering that concussion. He was reliable. He was that guy that allowed them to neutralize the death lineup, right? To make the Warriors' greatest strength a weakness in that series, with his ability of the defense staff to switch out onto the perimeter and still play with decent size. So I absolutely think so. And, nothing he does, on the court, even if he does return, makes me think like it's either strengthening or weakening his case. I think the only thing that could weaken a case for a jersey retirement is, something that happens off court, right? And there's never been any indications that Tristan has been anything other than a leader with this group. But it does tie into a question that Mason had, which I think we should probably just get to at this point, which is, considering the injury histories of Nance, Hunter, Wade, can the Cavs really afford to use a roster spot on someone like Tristan, who shouldn't really be on the court anymore, right? Like, it's kind of the ceremonial role. Carter, what are your thoughts there?
I think there is, like, if you're going to ask me, are you worried about a big getting hurt? Yeah, I am worried about that. And I do think I would like them to use that 14th spot on someone I'd like to see be able to play, and feel comfortable playing, And by the way, I felt that way about Tristan 2 years ago. I thought he gave them really, really good minutes. Last year, less so. Saw some more cracks in the armor last year. But I do think sometimes people look at, like, they added another injury prone guy, and then, they feel that way. But I'm always like, well, I mean, it's still like you're just looking at the aggregate chance of having your rotation meaningfully affected by injury. And by having another player that you really like, and Larry, in the front court, like, if someone gets hurt, you're still better insulated than you were for your bigs than you were last year.
Yeah, the depth chart last year was Mobley, Yang, Wade, right?
Yeah, Wade was your backup 5.
Yeah, he was your backup 5, and in a lot of cases backup 4, right? Like we're playing downshifting with Niang, but I think when there was injuries, we saw that Wade kind of stepped up in that role. To your point.
Yeah, so like I feel like people want to like say like that, like they're somehow less insulated just because Larry has gotten hurt quite a bit in his career. That's still not true. You know, they're more insulated.
I think it'd be more true if we moved Wade for Lonzo instead of Okoro, right? Yeah. Like then I think you have some front court depth questions there.
Yeah. With that said, I still would like a 5. I'd like a pure 5 as a backup signing, someone who I really trust to play those minutes. So I think it's a fair question, but I'm not sure the framing is fair. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so, right? Like I think the bar, like if we're talking about the 15th man and the 15th roster spot, I think that would be a bit of a different conversation. But even if you do sign Tristan, you do have the flexibility to sign someone else. With that being said, even as, you know, a diehard Tristan fan here, I think I'd prefer to see them go another direction. I think Larry provides a lot of kind of that locker room leadership. And, you know, we're kind of at that point too, where, you know, it should be Donovan. It should be Darius. It should be Evan. It should be Kenny. It should be Max, right? Like we have a lot of guys that either have proven to be those types of leaders in the past or have, should be stepping up into that role, that should be empowered into those roles. So I do think trying to find what options are available to you that can improve your roster the most should be the priority rather than, hey, let's get a veteran voice in here, right? Like, you know, Darius is turning 26. Donnie's in his prime. Evans, you know, already an all NBA player, defensive player of the year. I think the baton from a leadership standpoint needs to be with the best players.
Yeah. And I do think it's okay to go get a veteran. It's just a veteran that you are comfortable playing 10 minutes in a playoff game.
Yeah.
I think when you're this good of a team, you kind of can't have a guy on the roster. You can't go out of your way to get a guy that you don't want to give 10 minutes to in a playoff game.
Yeah, totally agree. Next question from HJ17. With Larry Nance signing, do you think Kenny starts Hunter or Dean since he now has a reliable option to play backup power forward again? I think the Cavs had the best winning percentage with Dean last regular season. Carter, your thoughts?
It's a good question, and it's probably my favorite thing about the Larry signing is that it does make it easier to give DeAndre minutes at the 3. What I'm really interested in is but I don't. So first, I'll answer the question, then I'll pivot a little bit. Answer the question. I don't think it drives the decision that much because I don't think that's the reason they didn't start DeAndre last year. Like, I don't think they were like, oh, we don't have enough backup 4 help. Like, because they liked Dean last year, you know, and gave Dean a lot of minutes last year. So I don't think that's the reason. So I don't think it will be the reason this year, even though I would like to see DeAndre start this year. I think what is more meaningful is how many minutes DeAndre plays at the 3. And I think what drives that more than anything is actually whether the 10th man minutes go to Jalen Tyson or Dean Wade. Because if you're giving Larry Nance, 15 to 20 minutes a game, you're giving Dean 10 to 15 or 15 to 20 minutes a game, You've got your 96 minutes of power forward and center spoken for at that point. And basically you're agreeing that DeAndre Hunter should play every single minute at the 3. Whether he starts or not, which is what I want and would be the happiest with. And thus, so that kind of feels like a weirdly important lever for DeAndre Hunter. Normally the 9th and 10th men don't determine the 6th man's usage, but in this case, I think it might just by proxy. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, right? Like there's ripple effects with any lineup decision that you make, right? And I think we saw that last year. It was basically necessary for them to play smaller for the season because you wanted to have Ty out there with either Donnie or DG every time one of them subbed off the court. And I do think, the point about Wade having the best winning percentage with him in the regular season, I think it's worth noting that of the lineup combinations that the Cavs had along with the core four, the Wade one was the least effective, right? Like Wade got hurt, Okoro subbed into that starting lineup, and then when Wade came back, they stuck with Okoro. The Okoro starting five outperformed the Dean Wade starting five, right? And I think sometimes people kind of bring out the measuring tape and they just assume, okay, because he's 6'10", that's going to be their best defensive lineup. When in reality, the Dean Wade lineup was considerably worse on defense compared to the Max Strus lineup. It was half as effective from a net rating standpoint. That Max Strus lineup had a 107 defensive rating. Like, that's pretty damn good. In fact, like, they had a 107 defensive rating against the Indiana Pacers. Again, that would be an elite defensive rating for the entire season. So it's not like they're getting cooked on that end. I do think that there is a legitimate, argument for starting DeAndre Hunter. The limited sample that we got with Hunter in the core four, that was their most effective lineup. It was only 73 possessions in the regular season, but that lineup absolutely rocks. So I don't see any scenario where Dean gets the starting nod, but I do think that it could, as you said, have a ripple effect. That what's that?
What if, though? That would be wild.
That would be pretty wild. That would certainly be a surprise, and that would certainly help out with the bench scoring. That's for sure. Mike asks, do you think keeping Hunter in a bench role may help with keeping him healthy? He certainly battled injuries over the years, particularly with his knees, but he's pretty healthy during his time with the Cavs last season.
I'm going to say no, it doesn't matter. I don't think whether he starts or is off the bench has any material effect on his on his health, because he's pretty much gonna, if anything, you could argue starting at the 3 with this team would save him more banging than being a backup 4 at times last season, having to guard, bigger, stronger dudes. So I'm leaning towards an immediate no, but do you have any other thoughts?
No, I don't think where he starts is going to make a big difference, right? Like when we talked about our rotations, I kind of have DeAndre and Max both penciled in for 28 minutes. I think that's what it's going to be regardless of who's starting. And honestly, like, I don't think there's anything magic about minutes per game when it comes to preventing injuries. I think where that comes into effect is, hey, you just played, 38 minutes or 40 minutes in an overtime game. It was the first night of a back-to-back. You're a little hurt, and we're going to let you play through it the next day. I think that kind of cumulative wear and tear, that has way, way more impact than does someone average 32 minutes per game versus 34 minutes per game. I think there's so much more context that goes behind those averages, and I think sometimes we kind of micromanage that in terms of thinking we have some ability to control whether or not there are wear and tear injuries. If you're playing, 34 minutes per game and you're not playing any back-to-backs and it doesn't really spike a whole lot more than that, and, teams being cautious when you're banged up, I think you're fine. So I wouldn't make lineup decisions based on that with DeAndre Hunter. But if you are going to implement some form of a minute restriction, you may think about what situation you want to prioritize. Do you think it's more important for him to be with the starting lineup? Do you think it's more important for him to be with the closing lineup? It is possible to have him do both and still manage those minutes, but then you have to be really conscious about how you're using him within the staggered lineups, right? Like how much are you playing him with the bench, right? When are those substitutions going to come? So I don't think any one starting location kind of, silos him into a specific role in terms of he can only start or close. But I do think that he's someone that warrants consideration when it comes to how many minutes you're giving him and when.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Going back to the YouTube chat, Joseph Santos says the Mavs need to waive someone to sign Dante Exum. Would Dwight Powell be a good third backup center for the Cavs? I'll let you answer before I answer, because I have some wider thoughts about this. I think this is a really nice thought starter for people to pay attention to. But first, I'd like you to answer the actual question.
This is a tricky one because I'm looking down at my soundboard and I don't have one for the Canadian national anthem. But yes, I would sign Dwight Powell. I would like him on the Cavs as a 14th man.
Yeah,
Carter?
I kind of feel like I would just re-sign Tristan at that point.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, he only played he only played 55 games last year, 10 minutes a game, mop-up duty. He's getting to a different point in his career. This is going to be his age 34 season, which is crazy. So, I mean, and I'm just never been the hugest Dwight Powell fan. So I'm not super into it. But wise minds could disagree. But the reason I liked the question actually is because it's a good opportunity to jump into some roster mechanic stuff when you're looking at the remaining free agent market and canvassing kind of what might happen. And there are teams that need to cut players just to be roster compliant. Keith Smith wrote up friend of the pod, Keith Smith, wrote up a really nice article on Spot Track where he talked about which teams need to sign players to hit the minimums and which teams need to waive players to be under the maximum or at the maximum. And so because this kind of helps inform, because a lot of teams are going to be happy to sit at the the exact amount of at the 14 rostered spots and just put their hands up and be ready to go into the year. There are 3 teams right now that need to waive players per the article that came out 2 days ago. Some of these might have changed a little bit. The Brooklyn Nets need to waive at least 2 players. The Charlotte Hornets need to waive at least 3 players, and the Mavericks need to waive at least 1. So if you're looking at potential options for the Cavs in that 14th spot, yes, you should be looking at the free agency market, but you also might want to be looking at those teams' rosters, see who's at the bottom, who might be the odd man out, and see if there's maybe an option there that might become available in a minute. Then on the other side, because I was looking, there's still a lot of really good players out there in free agency right now. A lot of interesting names that I would be really happy to see join the Cavs. And so you want to look at the other side of who has to sign players still. Cavs do. You cannot run into the NBA season with 13 rostered players. The Cavs will make a signing before it's all said and done. So the Cavs are one of those teams. The Pistons are one of those teams. And then the Sixers are one of those teams. So those are 3 teams that need to sign 1 player. Then the Knicks have to sign 2. So if you're if you're looking at the top guys left in free agency, you got to be worried about the Knicks because they don't have as much depth as the Cavs do, and they got to make 2 signings. So that's really interesting. Right. And then, Justin, the Golden State Warriors need to sign a whopping 5 players before the season starts.
It's funny to see, how our tastes change. We talked about that a little bit at the start of the podcast. Apparently the same is true for the Golden State Warriors, who no longer believe in strength in numbers.
I guess not. I mean, obviously there's a lot of reporting about DeAnthony Melton and Al Horford, being kind of soft penciled in and just waiting for the Kuminga thing to resolve itself before those things finish. But my word. But yeah, I mean, you look at it, there's only 5 teams that need to sign people before the start of the season. So you're really not competing in that big of a pool for the, in terms of the teams that must make a transaction. Not to say there aren't some teams at 14 that won't happily go to 15. Not everyone operates as the Cavs generally have. But I thought that was a helpful summary just to kind of look at the landscape for what remains of free agency before we get into training camp.
I think it is a very helpful summary, and I think the decision making goes beyond that as well. Like, there are likely going to be some veterans that are bought out as well, right? And the Cavs still have the flexibility to sign a bought out player regardless of what their previous contract was in the offseason, right? Like, that doesn't come into effect. That second apron restriction is not in effect until the season actually gets going. So it's not surprising to see that the Cavs are maybe weighing their options, seeing who gets cut, seeing who gets bought out. I'm sure they've talked to free agents, but when you see someone like Chris Boucher go to the Celtics, that was someone that we both really liked. But he might have a chance to start there, right? Like he or if not start,
And he was
might
signed
be
for
first.
more than what the Cavs can pay, by the way.
Right, like he might at the very least be first off the bench when it comes to the big. So there's a lot of variables here. There's a lot of things to keep track of, and sometimes I struggle to keep track of everything, Carter. That's why I rely on Zoom AI Companion, because only you can do your best work. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no additional cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion.
Rather, that Celtics depth chart is dire. I just pulled it up. Like
It's a little funky.
It's White, Pritchard. Okay, that's feeling pretty good. Simon
I thought you were
Shireman.
calling him White Pritchard.
Oh, that's hilarious. Derek White, Peyton Pritchard. Then it's Anthony Simons, Baylor Shireman. Then it's Jaylen Brown, Sam Hauser. Also, Sam Hauser's the starting power forward with Xavier Tillman. And then it's Keita Boucher Garza at the 5.
You know, to fill out the offseason,
how many wins are they going to have? Right now, don't think too hard about it.
37.
I was going to say, it's hard to imagine a team that starved of, like, I mean...
I think they're going to make moves in the middle of the season too, right? Like I think they might just sell off guys.
Yeah, I think Mark said they were only a couple million away from the first apron, and getting under that. Like, man,
I assume they'll be cautious with Brown's meniscus too, and you know Derek White's old too, so like there's just so many variables there.
What a wild team.
You know, I was just thinking about how I got to set up some of our interviews here to do our kind of off-season contender, or, you know, in the past, it was always teams in the Cavs kind of sphere, right? Like that we'll be competing up against. It's going to be really weird to not do that with the Boston Celtics this year, but there's just no reason to have them on. Next question from our buddy Alex. Any chance DeAndre Hunter starts the season as the starting small forward?
Yeah, I think there's a really good chance. Am I crazy, or does this actually feel like a very rare NBA camp battle? Like, where I just kind of feel like if I'm Kenny, I'm just going to be like, whoever plays better gets it. Like, because I think both of them have clear demonstrated strengths with that group. I think they each have some things maybe they're not so, you know, that maybe I wouldn't say they take off the table, but, you know, aren't necessarily strengths. Both of them are pretty high floor players on average. And it's just going to be like, well, who's better? Who's better? Because better might be a very reasonable thing here. And, like, you know, you don't see a lot of camp battles in the NBA for starting spots. You see them for, like, rotation minutes or existence on the roster. But, like, this does feel like a very potential, like a real camp battle where it's like, if I'm Kenny, I'm coming in and saying, who wants it? Come get it, you know? Like, it's good. You know, you have to draw a really fine line in a team construct when you're having, like, intra-team competition. But it's a healthy thing sometimes. And a little edge does not hurt a team. And I think this is a good spot to demonstrate that, you know, quality wins.
I think the other variable is how do you balance the lineups and the rotation the best, right? Like we know when we think back to, you know, the golden age of Spurs basketball, Manu Ginobili was very clearly one of their best players, but he was coming in off the bench because Popovich liked what it did to balance out the rotation and, you know, have that scoring punch come in off the bench, have someone that can run that second unit. And I think that there's a lot of variables to consider when it comes to Hunter versus Strus. I mentioned on the last podcast that I really like the idea of Hunter coming in off the bench because I think those lineups, particularly in the time with DG out, off the bench, are going to need a bit of a scoring punch. I think they're going to need that to balance out those lineups. And if you want to be cautious with his minutes, it might make it easier to close with them. But as I said before, just because you start with Hunter doesn't mean that you can't close with him and still manage his minutes, right? You can still have him with that starting group. You can sub him out right away. And, you know, I think there's a case for Max, even though he's not the same scorer as Hunter, playing with the bench because he is someone that gives you that movement shooting. He creates opportunities for other guys. He's a better playmaker than Hunter. And, I think he'd be playing primarily as a shooting guard there, maybe with Lonzo and Donnie or some other combination like that. And it allows you to play bigger. It allows you to have Dean out there, maybe Dean and Larry along with one of the bigs and really lean into the defense. So I think it could go either way. And I'm mostly with you that I think it should come down to whoever earns those minutes, right? It's the same thing that we feel with Jalen Tyson versus Craig Porter Jr. and Proctor. All of these kind of battles for various spots within the rotation. The only way you can fairly do it on a team with a lot of guys that deserve minutes is to give it to whoever earns them.
Yeah, I think that's very, very fair. It's gonna be an interesting battle. I'm excited to see, and it's one of those things where I'm trying to almost make sure I don't work myself up to like almost get too over-indexed. Oh yeah, too invested on a side where it's like there isn't really a wrong answer here. And the Cavs will be very good no matter who starts. So it's really, to your point, a big factor of, just what does the coaching staff believe and what do they want out of like the holistic roster.
Yeah, you're not doing it to solve a problem, right? Like as I mentioned before, that Max Strus lineup, 107D rating in the regular season, 107D rating against the Indiana Pacers with the rest of the core four. The defense hasn't been an issue. You look back to them getting eliminated against the Celtics, Garland, Mitchell, Strus, and Mobley with no Jared Allen to back them up. I think a lot of those minutes even came with George Niang. That lineup outscored the Celtics in that series, in a series that we lost. That hasn't been an issue. So you're choosing between two options that have been very successful for you last season. And, I understand where people are coming from. I was in the Hunter camp last year. I saw our buddy Luca from Real Cavs fans was kind of posting about the core four effectiveness and net rating, particularly in the playoffs the last 2 years. I understand that hasn't been good, but I think a lot of that has been on the offense. We've talked about that pretty extensively. And when I look back at the last 2 years, I don't think net rating in situations where Darius, Donovan, and Evan are all playing hurt has really anything to do with Max. And Luca actually did have a really good question, though, which came with some good stats and research that he did, which is, does bench scoring really matter? And, I made the case last week that I wanted Hunter's scoring to come in off the bench. And here are the regular season bench scoring ranks by NBA champions. Just a little context before we give our answers. OKC last year, 18th. Boston, 26th. Denver, 19th. Golden State, 11th. Shout out strength in numbers. Milwaukee, 19th. Lakers, 11th. Toronto, 17th. Golden State, 22nd. Golden State, 21st. And Cleveland, 28th. Carter, your thoughts. Does bench scoring matter?
I don't know if it matters as much as bench. I do think bench impact matters. But like in terms of like, especially in like an era where we just don't do the thing, like there's not going to be a game that the Cavs are really trying to win that they're like, hey, DeAndre, you're going to play with 4 non-scorers. We need you. Like, they're always going to have offensive threats on the floor because no one runs 5-man bench units. So part of me is just like, I don't know if it matters that much as long as you've got punch. I do think like having punch in multiple spots and being balanced and where you can hurt teams matters. Like, I don't like what the Cavs did in that series against Indy, where it was just the guards trying to generate buckets. But do I care if it's, I don't believe in putting a low usage guy in your starting lineup so you can make sure you get bench scoring, because It's just, so yeah, I think in short, I agree with Luca. I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I think what matters is, are you able to have functioning lineups for 48 minutes?
Do your lineups win games?
Like do you have enough scoring when your starting 5 isn't in? And that scoring may still come from a member of the starting 5, right? Like I look at some of those teams, those past NBA champions, and those staggered lineups, whether it's, hey, we're bringing on in Andre Iguodala or, Stevenson or like whomever, right? Like Sean Livingston. So many different guys.
Who's Stevenson?
I don't know. I meant Livingston. Don't push me on that.
We talking about Lance Stevenson?
Hey, you know what? He brought that punch for Indy coming in off the bench. Don't you dare question his contributions to the game, my friend.
You just made up an NBA player like it was gonna be okay.
I meant Livingston. That's the worst part. My brain is so fried right now. But I all those guys, they would come in and they would bring something to the table, right? And when I'm talking about having DeAndre Hunter out there with the bench, I'm thinking, okay, these lineups might struggle to score a little bit with Darius not out there in some of these iterations. I'd like to see Hunter give them a little bit of a punch. That could be true even if he is a starter and is playing with some of these bench lineups. So then the question becomes, how can you kind of maximize and get him easy looks so that whoever is going to be the play finishers in these bench lineups are put in positions to succeed where they don't have to really kind of basically do what Donovan Mitchell did against the Orlando Magic and the Indiana Pacers. So I don't think it really matters, but I do think having functioning lineups throughout your rotation, throughout all the different shift changes that you do is the most important thing. And sometimes you are going to make trade-offs in order to have a balanced 48 minutes. But I agree with you. I don't think you want to have a novelty starter out there, just being low usage so that you can have that column that says bench scoring reflect one thing or another.
Yep, absolutely, brother.
All right. Next question is from Mason Stevenson. Are there any particular zone lineups you're looking forward to, like DeAndre or someone else long at the head of the 3-2, like we saw with Evan? In the zone, do you tend to prefer smaller guys like Sam to be in front, or would you prefer for them to be in the back to secure the corner and leave longer guys in front to contain? Carter, your thoughts on the zone?
I like it best when you have as big of a lineup as possible out there and as mobile of a lineup as possible out there. I don't like it when guys are having to scramble out or get tagged out in weird spots or anything like that. Even though clearly the Pacers had figured out that 3-2 by the end of that series, I still liked that they did it. I like it as a break glass in case of emergency. And I still think that's the most interesting and unique zone the Cavs can play. And in some cases, part of me wonders if like the reliance on the zone last year was like almost a bit of a crutch, little bit of a Band-Aid. So where like they're not guarding well, so let's try the zone. And sometimes it did work. I don't want to, I think it won them some games. I think kind of indisputably it won them some games. But part of me wonders if that like at the highest level, you can't do that for like an entire quarter. So like, I think I just kind of want to see less zone because of that general belief system. Obviously, again, reasonable minds can disagree, but if they're going to play zone, I do like the Mobley at the front of the zone the best with Hunter and Allen down at the two pivots.
Yeah, I think I like 3-2 zone with this team more than I like the 2-3. In general, you want to have the smaller guys up front, at least in my opinion, especially when we're talking about, Darius and Donovan in particular, or, even Sam. I like having Larry for this purpose because I think whether it is Hunter or Mobley at the top of the 3-2, having Larry and Allen, Wade and Allen, even Larry and Wade in some configurations, I think all of that works really well and allows you to be versatile. I think you have guys that can protect the rim, that can defend out in space. I think the Cavs can use more effective zone lineups with more length. So getting back to what you said, I like having length if you're going to go to it. But I would like to see a little bit more variety in terms of the looks that they throw. I think everything that they did, I liked at times, but it just felt like they stuck in it a little too long. And, you really have to rely on your guys. If you're going to change up, your coverages and things on the fly, you really have to rely on that defensive communication. So I would like to see that be an area of growth for the Cavs where, all right, we're going, 3-2 for a couple possessions. Now we're going back to man. They're showing, or maybe there's a specific look you're looking for from the offense. And when you see that, when you see them start to initiate a set, you switch into zone. I'd love to be able to see them display that kind of versatility on defense. I just think it comes down to communication.
Absolutely, brother.
The second half of Mason's question is any offensive actions you're hoping to see back in the offense. I personally want to see more double screening action where one big rolls and one pops. I love the horn sets, Carter. And, the one kind of look that I'm looking forward to, and maybe this is something that they're going to get to work on with DG out. I want to see Evan Mobley handling in those situations with either DeAndre or Wade and, probably Donovan Mitchell. I want to see, let's have those two guys as kind of the horns, Mobley as the ball handler, have, Donnie step up first to see if they try to pre-switch it and get a small on there, and then maybe have Wade or Hunter come in as the screener, have Mobley attack that mismatch. I think you kind of confuse the defense in terms of having both the smalls and bigs involved in that. Mobley is so versatile as an offensive player, and you have to really kind of pick your poison in terms of what he's going to do. I would love to see Mobley as the ball handler in those types of sets. I think that's the one thing that I'm really looking forward to.
I think that's a great shout, and mine is also a Mobley as the lead creator. I want to see, and I feel like they kind of didn't do this as much last year as compared to under JB. I want to see more elbow catches for Mobley that flow into big pick and rolls with Allen. I think I think it breaks a lot of big man defenders' brains to have to navigate a pick and roll together. A switch is really easy to slip when you're that close to the basket for an alley-oop. I think it, if you space well around it, you can run a short pick and roll like that without a tremendous amount of help crashing down in the pass, because Mobley's in the center of the court. The angles for passes are easy. I just really like those plays, and I feel like it also is like a straight up like requirement that Mobley does something aggressive with the ball, like because you can't waltz through a tight quarters pick and roll. Like everything has to be aggressive and decisive to do it, and I just think that's one of their little cheat codes that they went away from at times last year. And I want to see them really I want that to be like an entree in their offense, not a fun dessert every now and again.
I like that answer. I like that answer a lot. This next one, I combined two questions from Adam and Brian. They were asking about the De'Aaron Fox extension. There, I guess, is some questions or speculation that the extension for Fox with the Spurs is to allow them to go big game hunting in the future, might not be a long-term commitment with them, especially with the rumors of them favoring pairing Wemby with Darius last offseason. Do you think the Spurs really intend to stick with Fox long-term, or is that a trade chip for later? I will say, obviously, last offseason, there was a lot of rumors that the Spurs had interest in Darius. You listen to the reporting of national guys like Brian Windhorst and whatnot of the offers that they were making, and it did seem like they were making lowball offers. I think it makes a lot of sense, but I think a lot of things have changed since then. Stephon Castle has really stepped up. Harper, I really like him as a prospect. And when you look at this extension for Fox, with the Cavs being in the second apron, Fox making a whole lot more than Darius on an annual basis moving forward doesn't make that feasible forget likely, right? I think from a salary perspective, you're kind of more in that Donovan Mitchell range, and Fox and Darius don't make any sense together. So I don't think that this has anything to do with the Cavs. As far as them having other pursuits, we're not reporters with the Cavs. We certainly aren't that on the national level. We're not well sourced or anything like that. So I could see it. I think anytime you have two, point guards or guards that you've drafted with high capital, and certainly high potential. I think that there's the potential to move off a third guard for having it. But Stephon Castle and Harper are both, 6'6", 6'7". I think you could pretty feasibly run 3-guard sets if you want to. So I think, it made sense for San Antonio, but I don't think that their plans have anything to do with the Cavs, if I had to guess.
I'm sorry, you don't pay a guy over 30% of the cap as a trade chip, especially a guy like that doesn't have like no doubt pedigree. Like, if anything,
it's a little divisive in terms of.
I thought this was a wild deal given the state of San Antonio's overall roster for a guy who's going into his age 29 season. I'm blown away by this deal, to be honest, by the reporting terms. I thought, if they wanted to move him and just, recoup some value, like, because by the way, they didn't give up that much value for him. Like, so they wouldn't need to recoup a lot to be like net neutral. I would argue it'd probably be more movable on his prior expiring than this.
It seems like they like him.
I think they just like him, and they like him more than I think the rest of the league likes him. So I don't think so. I don't think there's like some 4D chess happening here. I think the Spurs traded for a player that they liked and then retained that player that they liked. Yeah, and whether they made a good choice or not, will be borne out by the results.
Another question from our Discord. Drew asks, is there anyone on the Cavs right now who doesn't play on opening night but will be part of the playoff rotation? My snap answer is no, because Kenny plays a pretty deep rotation to begin with. And I just don't the only guy that I could see maybe being part of this mix is Proctor, but I just don't think a rookie is going to play meaningful rotation minutes in the playoffs for a team that has championship aspirations, that for a team that's, the favorite to come out of the Eastern Conference next year. I don't realistically see that happening. And, I think that the cheat code for this answer too is if Darius isn't playing to start the year, that opening night rotation is even larger. So I can say that the top 11 are probably going to play in that opening night rotation.
That's a bad faith answer. And for a listener that you often critique for being bad faith, and our dear friend Drew, how dare you?
Fire, baby.
How dare you? I think the answer could be Jalen Tyson, because I don't think he is in the rotation to start the year if the whole team's healthy. I think Dean will be in that spot. I think Larry will be in that spot. I think Sam will be in that spot. Like, all those guys, I think, are ahead of Jalen on the pecking order right now. I'd be surprised to see that change to start the year. It doesn't mean it can't happen, but I guess my answer is whoever's number 11 on the roster when healthy has a good shot at closing the year in the rotation, because this team's pretty deep.
And that number 11 will be 10th in the rotation on opening night in all likelihood.
And you're disgusting. Continue.
I know. Alex asked, what's the highest possible usage Mobley could have next season? Is higher definitely better, or is that too simplistic to think about it this way? And I want to go to a stat that I love, which is the true usage, which, for those that aren't familiar, measures not only how frequently do possessions end with you, it's that plus how many possessions when you're on the court do you create an assist opportunity for someone else.
Is that a basketball index stat? Where's that one come from?
That's a basketball index stat. That was developed by Seth Partnow.
Okay. Go ahead.
So to make it clear, it measures how often when you're on the court, how often do possessions end with you taking a shot, turning the ball over, or creating an assist opportunity for someone else. Last year, Mobley's true usage rate was 35.83%, which was 131st in the NBA. If you look among all NBA players, the only ones, relatively close were Karl Anthony Towns at 38.10%, which, he's mostly a spot up player that doesn't provide a lot of playmaking, and J-Dub at 45.49%. As a reference point, Donnie is at 51% and DG is at 50%. So about 15% higher than Mobley. I think that needs to grow. I think that type of balanced approach in terms of not only upping his scoring, but how much responsibility he shares in terms of initiating the offense needs to increase. Obviously, this stat is going to favor guards. You're not going to see a lot of big men that are up there in this stat. Bam Adebayo is around 38%, right? I think that kind of 38%, it would be my starting point. I understand it's only 3% more, but that's Domantas Sabonis. Anthony Davis is at 43%. If you can kind of get him in that range, I just think it makes the Cavs more versatile offensively. And if we're talking about Evan Mobley developing into one of the best players in the league, you need to get that usage out of him. You can't use him, sparingly. We need to see exactly what we have to get, what we have in Evan Mobley. And I think getting him more overall usage rather than just force feeding him touches as a scorer is the most important thing.
You're right on all this stuff. But I do think I can be a little reductive and say, yes, it is that simple. And yes, it is inherently a good thing. And not because it inherently will drive the best results, but because it will give us the best data, the best muscle memory, and the best understanding of where this team needs to go and change and grow as they continue on this journey. We kind of know what the ceiling is of the guard-led offense when things matter,
Yep.
And
we also see the wear and tear effect on them.
Yeah, we see the wear and tear effect. We see how things can gunk up I use the Swiss watch analogy a lot with our offense. Beautiful thing, but you get a grain of sand in there, all of a sudden things start to chunk up and break. And like, you need to find out if this is the road to a more sustainable postseason offense.
Yep.
And whether you find out it's not the road or you find out it is, you need to find out, because there are a lot of down the line roster implications that come with having that information. But until you have it, we're just guessing. So yes, it is inherently good no matter what happens. Even if the offensive rating is worse by 5 points or something this next year, because you work too hard to give Mobley more usage. I don't care. You need to know.
You know what? Yeah, I think that's a very good guess. And, speaking of good guesses, our listeners sometimes, the questions they ask are so good, they ask us follow-ups without even hearing our answer. Our buddy Soul asked, how do you guys see Mobley's role expanding next season? Ideally, his usage should increase, as we just said, but in what ways do you want to see him used more? Example, not just shooting more. You guys mentioned on the last pod that his usage in the clutch decreased from 23 to 12%. How should the Cavs better utilize him so that he's involved at the end of games?
I already hit one of them, which is I want to see more big pick and rolls. I want to see more elbow touches where he can face up and make a read, whether it's attacking off the dribble, mashing a post up, or just making a decision with the ball while an off ball action happens.
Yeah.
I think that's there. I think using him as a press breaker more often and challenging his handle.
Love that.
Is something I want to see, that just inherently kind of gets the ball into his hands and gets him catching in motion. Even some, not full on pen downs, like in the more modern sense, where it's like he's flaring all the way out to the 3-point arc, but like a short curl off a pin down where he catches the ball on the move coming up from the block to the other elbow or something like that. Like, I remember that one of his game winning jumper was kind of one of those plays a couple years ago. So like, those are the kinds of usage I'd like to see.
Yeah, I want to yes and there. I think everything that you said is accurate. I'd love to see all of those things. I'd love to see him, operate at the nail more. I want him basically to go study some Kevin Garnett Minnesota tape, because I think people forget, even back in those days, KG was getting 4 or 5 assists a night, running offense, facing up guys. I'd like to see Mobley develop that mid-range jumper. I think that would be really important, just to make the dribble handoffs more potent, to allow him to attack guys that are closing out at him at the nail even more. I just want to see that skill set develop, and then also have that skill set empowered within the offense, to have that be a consistent kind of focal point. And I think why I really want to see that implemented in the offense is because I believe strongly that we're going to be able to run that even with the second unit, right? Like Larry is really good at that kind of stuff. And I think Larry's the perfect type of mentor to help Evan expand his playmaking and the type of reads that he is more than capable of seeing. It's just, hey, this is this is kind of the step by step in terms of how you can add this to your game. And when you make mistakes, having that coach on the bench to point that kind of stuff out, I think it's going to be really invaluable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. It's been fun. It's fun talking about Mobley. I think I'd be bored with it by now, but I'm not.
Yeah, totally agree. So, Josh, final question here. Which players are on the hot seat this year, like Ice was last season? I think this is a really unfun answer, but when you have championship aspirations, I think kind of everybody is. Like, I think I've everybody with the exception of Evan Mobley, because I think we are firmly building around Evan Mobley, but I think of the guards. Darius has been banged up the last 2 years in the playoffs. Donovan has had, the recurring calf issues and, kind of lower body ailments. If both of them aren't healthy again in the playoffs for the third year in a row, I think that leads to tough questions. If either of them are not healthy, I think that leads to tough questions. I think Jared Allen, not only his own individual play, but if Evan Mobley takes a significant step forward where all of a sudden you feel different about how he can play at the center, and you have more options to play at power forward now, maybe that drives questions. I think there's pressure on the coaching staff. I think there's pressure up and down the lineup. I think there's pressures for guys like Max Strus and DeAndre Hunter of whether or not they can be the right role player. So it's not a fun answer, and maybe it's a bit of a cop-out, but I do think that's part of the game when you become a legitimate title contender. And I think the Cavs coming up short next year just makes the seats get a little bit warmer for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All that's accurate. If I'm going to almost interpret the question a little bit literally, because I feel like with Ice, he was on the hot seat insofar as like, this is his last chance to prove that we think he can even help in a playoff setting.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all kind of understood what Ice was as a helpful regular season player who would have good lineup data and stuff, and we were just like, is his offense going to tank in the postseason again? And ultimately, proved to not be able to be something he could overcome, at least with the Cavs. So to that end, I think the answer is Dean. I think Dean is going to start this year in the rotation.
Okay.
And if he doesn't, I would actually argue that probably means that the hot seat already burned him, so to speak. You know what I mean? But because I don't think that's true, and I think he will start the year in the rotation, I do think this is kind of his last chance to prove that hey, his playoff splits are bad on offense.
Yeah.
They gotta be better. You can be as good of a defender and fundamental player as you want. You can't shoot the way he shot in the postseason.
Particularly being healthy for the first time in the playoffs last year too, right?
Yeah, and still get to play. So I think if anyone's on the hot seat in that way, it's Dean.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I see one more question here just from the YouTube chat about true usage, and I think this is a good clarifying question. Is true usage a zero-sum metric, meaning that increasing Mobley's means lowering someone else's? To some extent, it is, right? Like anytime you are taking playmaking or scoring reps away from someone, that's going to have an impact on their usage. It doesn't mean that, for a period of time when everyone's on the court together, that the true usage is all going to add up to 100% when you take each person's true usage, because a percentage point that's Mobley's playmaking is still going to count within someone being the play finisher, right? Someone's going to be taking the shot and ending that possession. So there is going to be some overlap with that, but it does accurately capture in terms of how much usage when they're on the court is being taken up by them. And
I do think that it's functionally zero sum, maybe not in a 0 to 100, scale, but I do think it's functionally zero sum. And I don't care. I'm fine with lowering someone else's to raise Mobley's.
Totally agree, right? And I think it would pay dividends, right? Like, I think taking some, obviously we're going to need to rely on him at the start of the year, but I think taking some playmaking reps, or at least ball handling reps out of the hands of Donovan Mitchell is a good thing for him, right? Like, let's get Donovan easier shots. Let's make him not have to work as hard. I think what teams can do throwing length at Darius and Donovan can be mitigated by using Evan Mobley. We've been saying that since this group has been put together. But I do really like that true usage stat just because I think it gives a more accurate picture. Like, you look at Tyrese Halliburton as an example, by true just usage percentage, he's a low usage player. Like, he doesn't like register in that same way, but obviously he takes up so much of the team's overall offense, right? Like, he is the one that's creating all these shots for these guys. And I don't think anyone's surprised to see, at the top of the true usage charts, it's Trae Young, it's LaMelo Ball, guys that dominate all that kind of stuff. And then it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but Tyrese Halliburton's up there, right? Like, he's in the top 10 for true usage. But regular usage, he's barely registers. He's I think he'd be like 5th on the Cavs, which doesn't capture how much responsibility a guy like that has.
Yeah, base usage percentage is a very odd stat, to be honest.
It really is. Yeah, I think it is telling. I think you can look at that and maybe like effective field goal percentage to judge a score, or true shooting percentage if you want to weigh in.
But it is just your scoring, really.
Right. So, I think sometimes that gets lost in the discourse, or people that are newer to kind of stats, they'll look just at that without understanding the context of it. But that's one of the reasons why I like using that stat. So, big thanks to everyone that asked the questions. Both the initial questions and the follow-ups, the people hanging out in the chat, we really, really do appreciate you guys. It helps give us content at this time of the year, and hopefully it was interesting. So big thanks to you guys. If you're watching live on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chasetown's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of their review to chasetownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.